Long live the South African Communist Party, long live. Long live the member of SLOVO, long live. Long live the member of Tango, long live. VANGA, viva the African National Congress, viva. Viva the ANC, viva. Viva the ANC Women's League, viva. Viva the ANC Youth League, viva. Viva the ANC Veterans League, viva. Viva Cosaco, viva. Freelance elections on normal Kenya. Viva Saco, viva. Campesino, Campesino. Sekutana, sekutana, mawetu. Sekutana, mawetu. very much congratulate the chair, the director, the provincial secretary for attempting to introduce me. The members of the Provincial Executive Committee, of course, the party, the Free State, as led by the PS, the peace members of COSATU, and the leadership of COSATU, as led by our PS, the COMMEMORATION, the YCL, the National Secretary is now here, and the Central Committee members here, Comrade Pet and Comrade Muguni, members of COSATU, members of the Communist Party, members of the African National Congress, and leaders of the African National Congress. I know that maybe they may not have confirmed a speaker, but I was worried when we said the ladies is not here when we are here. So the ladies is not here. Maybe the speaker was not confirmed, but we are here. Unapologetically so. But comrades, I think in your introduction, you made a little bit of my problems easier. Because I was wondering what I'm going to say and do here, because UPS, presented the life and times of Comrade SLOVO. UPS of the party did that and contextualize it also in terms of our contemporary politics. Now, should I do the same and read and repeat or even contradict, by the way? Because when you repeat the same thing, once you are telling your code, one will contradict and will confuse the masses. Perhaps let us transition from that presentation of the life of SLOVO to a conversation among ourselves. What is it that us as members of SLOVO must do to us? Because we're not doing so because we missed him. We are not nostalgic. We are doing so as a call to arms, as SLOVO's life will have done so in his time, that when the need arose, he took up arms. So we must invoke the spirit of Comrade SLOVO in this 31st anniversary of his death, but also in his centenary of his birthday, to guide us in the muddy waters that we are traversing as a country, as a movement, and as a globe. What is it that the Comrade SLOVO's life can help us to navigate using his teachings and his examples? Maybe I can first suggest to Balada, I think exactly on the 23rd of May, moving forward this year, we should, as part of that calling of the Spirit, do a massive centenary celebration of his birth throughout the year. And I guess because South African Communist Party was on the campaign trail, to utilize that to build momentum for the struggle ahead. Now, I want us to just say that, like Comrade Memela said, we asked SLOVO to speak to us today about the problems we're facing today. Firstly, to SLOVO, it will have taught us that all problems we are facing in the world, it is because of the two antagonistic contending classes, the bourgeois and the working class. It's a struggle for a world without the barbarism of capitalism, which is socialism, vis-a-vis the existence of capitalism as a system across the globe. And that it doesn't matter who is in power and which country is that. For as long as there exists a system, the economic and government system in the globe that is called capitalism, the need for a struggle and a cause for a socialism will always remain. Because the problems of the class oppression of one member and another, the economic exclusion, will not end for as long as the system called capitalism exists. So that's how SLOVO's life in a nutshell embodied, and he taught us like that. And therefore, we must know, if you think you don't have water, if you think you are not employed, if you think you are getting low salaries, if you think you are being ignored by politicians, the reason is because in the country of South Africa there is a system called capitalism that exists everywhere else in the world, where its mantra or its modus operandi is to make sure that the class that is oppressed and there's a class that is ruling that is oppressing the other. And the liberation of that is to dismantle that system, is to defeat and collapse it. And he taught us that capitalism will not collapse at its own. I thought so from it must be pushed, it must be collapsed, it must be decimated. So the question we must ask ourselves and the answer we must take is, to what extent are we prepared to resolve the problems of the country, to resolve the problems of the world, but we know that to resolve those problems is to dismantle capitalism. What are we going to do? Now here, what SLOVO's life teaches us and it calls upon. You will know that SLOVO was not born in South Africa, okay? He's a Jewish immigrant. He was born somewhere else to a Jewish parents that flew their country to come to South Africa because they were running away from what they call anti-Semitism, when the Jews were being killed. So he ran away. But we remember, him in South Africa as our most foremost revolutionary, committed, patriotic, as if he was born and bred. He was not. He came here to find refuge, to hide from a genocide that had been committed to his tribe or to his race, the Jewish people. So he was a white person. You see, the Afrikaners here, I can't talk about that matter, that are running away from South Africa to America because they think we're killing white people. And because of that, because of their color of their skin, they are safe in America more than black Americans are safe in America. So when SLOVO's parents came here, and him as a young boy, he was very safe, comfortable from a white supremacist at the time. That was a colonialism and apartheid that was existing in the country. So he had no danger in his life. There was nothing that threatened his comfort in his life and that one of his freedom. But because of who he is, he saw an injustice happening in South Africa. There was apartheid, black people were oppressed, black people were treated as subhuman, black people were not given quality education, they were being shambled and so on. A revolutionary in him arose and said, I must take up arms, I must fight. And just like Che Guevara, who himself was an Argentinian born, but he went on to fight a struggle internationally in Angola, in Zambia, but more importantly, we know him in Cuba. One of the things that drive him is, they say, in particular Che Guevara, if you trample upon any injustice meted out to anybody, then you are a comrade of mine. So much as SLOVO was not threatened by the apartheid government, much as there was no business of him being arrested because he was a white boy, he was a refugee. But when he saw other human beings suffering in South Africa, he offered himself to step to the front and take an action and fight about the country. He had to do what? To be arrested at some point. He had a principle that there will be no injustice that can happen to another human being unaware. Now, how many times do we hear about or do we witness here in the country, in the neighboring community or in the neighboring countries, injustice being meted out to But Baborena and we do nothing. So what Joseph is that if you ever lie to yourself, or when you have a conversation with other people and you say, I have a principle that I live with, you must know that the principle, the test of that principle, it is tested when you defend something that does not affect you. This is injustice, and you stand up and defend it because you know it is wrong, even though it does not affect you. That's why the principle here is, and that's what Comrade SLOVO teaches us. And a principle, it's worth nothing. If you believe in some values, a principle is worth nothing until it takes something away from you. When you defend a principle, in particular a principle that affects other people, it does not affect your comfort. For if its value to be tested, that it's worth something, it must make you lose something. That's why Joseph lost freedom. He went to jail. That's why Joseph had to go to exile, where he had no business going to exile and going to jail, because he had no problem with the South African white police. There was no problem. But he lost his freedom. He needed to be incarcerated. He was sentenced. He was almost killed. He has to flee against South Africa because he could not bear to witness an injustice happening to the next person, and he does that. In other ways, and in particular because they come from outside South Africa, we call that internationalism, we call that international solidarity, just like solidarity. That's why when Che Guevara dealt with the liberation of the Cuban people, he moved on to another country. He was killed somewhere else, not in Cuba. He was everywhere else because he was practically, not theoretical, but practically offering solidarity. When it needed most, he needed to take up arms to fight another national struggle. This is what in the midst of the injustice that is happening around, it could be the gender-based violence. What are we doing? It could be the crime that is ravaging our community. It could be unemployment of our young people. It could be the inability of some kids to attend schools. We believe and we behave as long as it does not affect me. There could be families that we know for a fact. Congress led tripartite alliance last summer. There's a lot of Congress led tripartite alliance last summer. There's a lot of things that could be done better. And we are confronted with challenges of leading society as an alliance, of leading government as an alliance, of persecuting the national democratic revolution as an alliance, but also of building and fostering unity. The life of Comrade SLOVO, Oliver Tambo, Moses Mabhida, and the like challenges us as the current generation of the leadership of the alliance to rise to the occasion, provide leadership, provide clarities to our people, and unite our people, particularly the people's camp. Because the people's camp is disintegrating, and it is largely disintegrating because we are failing to confront things. What we do, we either bury our heads in the sand, hoping that the problem will disappear, or we stand in this podium and we shout to one another instead of coming together and confronting issues. Joseph, Chris Hani, Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and all of them, they faced the problems of managing the alliance relations of their time. They never ran away from the problem. Now, it doesn't mean that the alliance at the time was closed, was rosy. The issue of racism was still very high inside the movement. The issue of class contestation and also the alliance as a platform or as a terrain of the class contestation was there, and it was even hard. Particularly during the time of transitioning towards negotiations and ultimately gaining become pure ANC and pure nationalist and pure NDR, not the class private fighters, not the fighting for socialism. So they didn't want to conflict it because now the candidate is of being in the organization that continues the class struggle and fight for socialism. We are now making in the pure nationalist organization that only deals with the national democratic revolution to build the national democratic society. So the rapture happened there. It was not chaotic, but it had indeed happened. Nobody rejected that kind of mentality. He understood that the link of the South African working class and the NDR and even wrote a book. He also understood the link between the national democratic revolution and the class for the socialism. In fact, he understood the NDR, or the liberation of the nation, as a platform, as a terrain that is going to march forward in the creation of a society called socialism. So that's what many of us, okay, let me talk about me. I still a member of the ANC and the SACP, and fortunately or unfortunately, I'm also a short story because I'm a member of the House and then I'm an affiliate of myself. And there shouldn't be a confusion about that. Maybe let me hesitate to say this point because I'm not yet at the fighting tour. I'm going to an national start. So I'm afraid if I raise this point later, and I look like I'm fighting. Let me raise it now. That comrade, for some of us, dual membership is not a burden. In fact, it's a privilege. It's an honor to belong to these organizations that are progressive, that are fighting for the liberation of our people. If there is anyone who has got a burden of belonging to two organizations, must not translate or transfer that burden to all of us. We have no burden of having dual membership. Look, comrades, we had dual membership during apartheid and colonialism. We had dual membership underground. We had dual membership in prisons. When we were in jail, we both members of the SACP and the ANC in jails. When we were in exile, we had dual membership. It was not an issue. In fact, the ANC was accused of being a communist organization because it was influenced by most of the communists. The reason why whites hated ANC or hated communism was because it was influencing the liberation movement. We had dual membership under difficult times, even in MP. So why in the democratic government was divided when it was difficult with dual membership, there was no issue. During apartheid, to be a communist was a crime. Are we entering a situation where in a democratic government being a communist is a crime? Because that's what I'm hearing now. Because we knew, we didn't blame the government of the day and the leadership of the National Party that declared communism as a crime against the state. That's what an act called Suppression of Communism Act, which a lot of leaders of the ANC were detained under that act. Is it a crime of the communist under the democratic state? But if that it is, so be it. Let us know, because we need communism in this world. We need socialism. We need Marxism in this world. So the point I'm making is that SLOVO, he knew that to be a communist was a crime. We could have left that thing. And, hey, I survived being killed in my country of birth because I'm Jewish. I can't be killed in South Africa because I'm a communist. When the communist is taboo in South Africa, he stayed as a communist because he understood the importance of being a communist. We, as the leadership of the Alliance, when we deal with this matter, we must invoke the spirit and the life of Comrade SLOVO to deal with this matter of the dual membership that we are vulgarizing now. we're making it as a swear word. Put this out there, so now we need to come to Spain, so we when we were fighting, we were never asked to choose whether you're a communist or when the enemy was there, we were never asked, are you going to fight this war being against only or both or being a communist? We were asked to take up arms irrespective of whether you're a communist or not. Why, when we must fight poverty and unemployment and the lack of representation of the working class in the state, why must we choose which we have to work? When the enemy that's confronting is so why when we must fight austerity and the budget cuts of education that we have, why must we be forced to choose whether you're wearing a cap of the ANC or of Assad or of the party? When the enemy is confronting all of us irrespective of the organization we belong to. Why? Because the enemy is underdevelopment of our people. The enemy is a lack of quality health of our people. The enemy is unemployment of our people. Why must that fight be fought by the color of a t-shirt or the badge of a t-shirt? Instead of being fought by the people of South Africa who seek to liberate themselves. Which is why Comrade SLOVO and his wife, by the way, Comrade Ruth, who eventually got killed in what was apart. So the point I'm making is that Comrade, we are failing. History is going to remember us as the current generation leadership of the alliance of having avoided to get into the room and confront and discuss the problem that is facing our people and what is it that is causing tension within the alliance. Unlike the Comrade SLOVO, who held this net and make sure that they discuss the problems of our people. And of course, as we all know, as if him as a young boy risked being arrested, expelled from school and put in exile, when the need for the people to volunteer, to sacrifice and pay the ultimate price, which is the life itself, arose, he was the first to create or the core commander of the Umkhondosi and liberation army of the movement. He didn't have to do that. He didn't come from that. He was a white person for completely. He escaped death as a Jewish boy. But he's here, he's putting himself in the firing line to be killed again by the white people, if need be, for the liberation of this country. That's what I want, defending a principle even when it doesn't affect you, even when it doesn't touches your comfort zone, even when it doesn't threaten you. Because you believe in the principle, it's a correct principle, you are prepared to do something in defense of that principle. That's why we know him today as a joint defense commander of the Umkhondosi. That's why we used to sing as young people, which was SLOVO, Notambo, Amakomanda. Futhi besihlanganisa sithi SLOVO, Notambo, Amakomanda. Sazi very well besiqinisile ngalo. Notambo, Amakomanda. Uthando was a communist. He didn't differentiate what is the difference between a communist and a communist. We just said, because to us it was one thing, it was a liberation movement. It was not issue at that time. It was a liberation movement. But today, just first of all, the transition role he played when we were now to gather, when we were now clear that the apartheid regime is about to fall, the majority government was installed. The test was how we go to gather. What is the task and what is the program that we must deliver or pursue different from the apartheid regime? That's why he's known as the father of the RDP. Of course, he worked very hard with Kosato to deal with this question of reconstruction and development program. Because our country, our society, our nation needed to be reconstructed differently from what it was during colonialism and apartheid. Now that we have freedom and democracy, we all spheres of life. It could be infrastructure, it could be economy, it could be the comfort of our people, but also the nation building itself. We needed to reconstruct that. We are now one nation, one country, no black, no white, no Kosa, no Vanga, no Sutu, no something. We are now reconstructing the way of life in the country. But we must develop our economy, we must develop our country, we must develop our. That is why he was called the father of the country. And foremost in it was a shelter for our people. Hence he was made the Minister of Human Settlement, the first one. But the only honor we gave him in that work, was to name the houses that we are distributing to our people, RDP. Don't know what it means, but these RDP houses, we call them RDP. You know why this is that? It's because that is the only thing that is left of that program, of the Reconstruction and Development Program of 1983 that we started in 1983. That's the only thing that is left. Everything else has been replaced by GIA, ASKISA, NDP, now mobile game, and so on and so on. All those things have replaced the Reconstruction and Development Program of Joslo. It lasted only 2 years, 94, 95. 1996, it was gone. GIA was introduced. 1996, it was gone. Maybe it is because he died in 1995. I don't know. It was 1 billion my woman was spaghetti to IKEA, and then we start order. We were going to call the houses because it was a minister of settlement. These are houses that will give our people RTP. That's the only thing that is left. Ourselves, his descendants, his students, those who love him, we must be ashamed of that situation that is. And that's where South African revolution started to veer off the rail. The moment we adopted GIA and we were told, when Kosaka was trying to scream there, Mandela came to our conference and told us that if the SACP go out and denounce and criticize the fundamental policy of the ANC, they must be aware of the implications. You know, we knew, but we felt shout at the end that finally the daughter you were teased. Yeah, at least she responded. Was what he did, but community had to Mandela next. But the point I'm making is that we're being intimidated to accept GIA, not just the policy of the ANC, but a fundamental policy of the ANC. Up to that time, we understood that the fundamental policy of the ANC would be the product of the robust alliance discussion. The last robust alliance discussion document or policy was that one of the RTP. We actually know, we can tell you now, GIA was not an ANC policy to start with. There was no structure of the ANC that discussed GIA. Just like there was no structure of the ANC that thoroughly discussed NDP. You know when we went to Mangau, the fundamental economic policy discussion that was taking place in the ANC and alliance was the second radical transition. Okay, the party took a lot of weight, but it was the second radical phase of transition, which Kalima Mukande was ridiculous to say when was the first phase. But that's what was discussed. That is why when we went to the conference, the split of the ANC, or the names of the ANC that came there, or after that, was the RET and what was the other thing? Renewal. Was it renewal? No, the renewal came after. But the point of it is that here was announced by President Zuma when he was opening the Congress. Not here, NGP. Because we were under pressure, because Rita Phillips was in a part as the ANC. We were under pressure that Cyril Ramaphosa was a deputy president, was the chairperson of the planning commission that was developing the NGP. They were to Trevor Manuel in that commission that were not liked by the radicals in the ANC, including us in the left. We didn't like the ideological post. We didn't like it. Now the test that President Zuma had was whether or not that conference of the ANC is going to reject the NGP because of who are the architects of that NGP. So he just adopted it as the conference, and then in the commission to start to discuss other things, but the radical first, just weird at the NGP conference. Now, the revolution of South Africa and as SLOVO would have wanted it to be started to veer off. That's why words like 2026 Trust Project started. That's why many strikes, in particular the public service, happened because Congress, that is when in the early 2000s, the privatization started to intensify now. That all the state-owned entities were now given the private land. We had marches when the government Jeff Kennedy was the Minister of Enterprises, was taking all this thing out of the state. Decapacitating the state from having the power and control of delivering key needed services to our people. In the public service, that's where many services that were rendered by our people were now outsourced. Security services were now outsourced, catering services were now outsourced, cleaning services were now outsourced in universities, in hospitals, in schools. Now things were now given to people. That's where the quality of the services we provide as public or as government became poor and poor and poor. Because no one will be held accountable, because these people are private people who are providing public services. That's the policy of the year. That's why we started with fear of. Of course, we continue to forward, we engage, because things are going to work, but things didn't go according to our. And of course, that's why today, the YCL calls its campaign for the freedom or the opening of doors of education, a SLOVO right to learn. Because it's also understood that in that document of RDP, part of reconstructing the country is to ensure that education is compulsory, accessible, and affordable and qualitative. It was part of that project. That's how we're going to reconstruct a society. That's how we're going to reconstruct a nation. Is to ensure that we empower and educate our young people. Now, of course, I must say that we would have called us into arms, as we did as an international league, observing the current geopolitics that is taking place, the aggression and the ascendancy of imperialism across the globe. You would have called us into arms now, like we're doing. Even yesterday, we were somewhere in Joburg with the massive organizations of the working class. The ANC, COMMEMORATION, PAC, COSATU, SACP, NUMSA, by federation, so what's business of? But comrades, Why I'm thinking that the action of yesterday with the closed door? It is because that's a demonstration of the working class unity of purpose, unity in action. Our problem is that we think we're going to achieve unity in boardrooms. We must have a bilateral, after bilateral, we must call an alliance political council, we must call an alliance assembly, we must have a bilateral again, we must have got an alliance secretariat committee, and we think we're going to achieve unity. But that's those things. So when leaders find each other, you know, when the president of the ANC is in good time with the general secretary of the SACP, then the alliance is united. The alliance is divided. That unity has got nothing to do with the rest of us as members of the alliance. It has got to do with their temperation as leaders. As long as they've got more meetings among themselves, the alliance will be fine. If the president of Kosato and the president of the ANC, it means Kosato strong, it means the ANC and Kosato are united. No. That's not a practical unity. That's not a genuine and organic unity. That's not an organizational unity. It's leadership unity. Unity and discipline must not only be accountable to the structure of leadership or the leadership structure, it must be accountable to the masses of our people. The masses with whom we purport to represent, we must account to them. Now, we had forgotten yesterday that we dismissed those from the we were very happy because we had one enemy, a mad dog in White House called Donald Trump. We had forgotten that they also formed a political party to contest the ANC because the ANC was there. It was understood that the enemy is Donald Trump in the United States of America. We had forgotten that the PAC is not one of the and so on and so forth. And I know Congress may ask me, so why do you say who is one of the progressive working class? You know, Congress, one of the politics we have to learn is that there is opposition in this country and there is a people's camp. COPE, UDM, EFF, MKP, they are external factions of the ANC. They are not in opposition to the ANC. It's a faction of the ANC, including the ATC here, is Makasho. That's not a political party that is opposed to the ANC. It's a faction of the ANC that is outside the ANC. Because we fail to manage fractional divisions, and then those fractional internally, they then move out. But the ANC outside the ANC. Those are factions, they are not opposition. And I always look at all of them, if we manage the faction, they will be still in the ANC. The opposition is the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Alliance. Because they all oppose all that which is there. Yeah. This is called those political parties may be the product of ill discipline. We fail to manage the discipline side. It was a question of a failure to manage the factional tolerance, and then people failure to accept the outcome of the conference. When I lose the conference, I feel I no longer belong, so I must move out. But I'm still part of the same KP. It's just that we have a factional debate and we're angry with the money. So, I don't know what it is. It's the daily outside the ANC, the end, and everybody, the EFF, the MKP. Those who are to the right, those are the ones who are. So that is why, if you look at what it took to make a choice to call the progressive, it just left out GA and the Freedom Front and the African Forum. Because it also understands that if we are going to say hands off Venezuela, GA is cancelling that song. If we are going to say release Maduro, African Forum and Freedom Front can't sing that song. So they define themselves outside of the people's camp. So we demonstrated yesterday that Congress, one of the big mistakes we made since 1994 was to demobilize mass mobilization, depoliticize the masses. I was asking a question to the DSO yesterday. I asked if we were the Central Committee on Friday, why are we as South Africans having a normal life? Now, this week, we convene, but it is the Central Committee will convene, ANC, we go home and sleep at night. When there are South Africans here in Western who have been deposed, taken out of the houses they've built by the Zamazamas, 300 families are dispossessed, they're taken out of the families, illegally, by illegal manner. And then we as government, we have to find shelter sometimes, as if there's been a national disaster. Like if people when I went over the national disaster. We have to find tents and wall to accommodate South Africans who have been pushed out of their houses by the illegal Zamazamas in mind. And we, all of us as a progressive, we go home and sleep and eat lunch with our families. We're living a normal life. What happened to our justice? What happened to our activism? This thing will not have happened in the 80s and in the 90s. No, we didn't care about the position of the state or the police or the soldier. How do we know as students, as youth, as civics, as workers, we're going to come back? After the yesterday, it will have adjourned, it will have marched, it will take those workers, those families back to their houses and literally form a human chain to protect and guard. That Central Committee of the SACP will have left there and said, we are going to we are going to defend our people against illegality and criminality in our country. As masses, not as a state. The state could have come and joined us if they want. If not, they must remove us. But how do we go home to sleep when our people have been taken out of their homes that they've built, and we must now find some shelter for them as if they never built their houses? What kind of a revolution are we doing? What consciousness do we have? How do you live? It's rainy season now. There are kids that will wake up and go to school. We don't know where they're going to wake up from because some people who are trading in illegal money, and then we are told by some police there says, no, actually if you go to Sunset, there's a communist flag there. So these people come there and even put a flag. So if you're not a communist, but you go to that area there, you must now negotiate a passport. In your own country. Township by township, village by village, settlement by settlement is going to be taken over by criminality. Soon, before we know it, we will have no country. Now, that action says, irrespective of the badge of your t-shirt, the union you belong to, the federation you belong to, we've got one flag that will serve upon. We've got one country. And if you can't defend this country collectively as South Africans before we consider our political affiliation, we will make up having finished each other with no country and with nobody to defend us. So the South Africans came up yesterday to say to Donald Trump, we see you were in Cuba, you were in Iran, you were in Libya, you were in Iraq, you were in Afghanistan, you are now in Nigeria. We know you are coming to us. Because that's another thing. We know you are coming to us. So I want to pose this challenge. I did pose it yesterday. Perhaps we feel helpless. There's nothing we can do to understand about America. Is that what you are feeling? Things were tough during Joston. There was no hope. Comrade, when Joston was a young boy and seeing people suffering, there was no hope except death. The terrorism was getting ceasefire arrest form. It was at the peak of the time. Across African countries were being colonized. But he didn't say, I can't do anything. Are we not learning anything? That there's nothing impossible. For as long as we are on the cause of fighting for justice, the national and regional will come. lies and isolate Russia. Isolate, boycott, sanction, all sorts of things. You all of a sudden you couldn't watch Russian TV. The multi-choice took down Russian TV. You can't watch it from here in South Africa. The athletes, the Russian athletes, they were supposed to go to Olympics. Was it Japan? Olympics. They were told you're not coming here wearing a flag or wearing something that is Russian. If you can't, just come as an individual athlete. Don't represent your country. You're not welcome here. They didn't go. The soccer team, even today, we in the trade union movement, in the international federations, in I2 in particular, not in the WF2, the classical, in I2 in particular, yeah, the trade union movement of Russia is supposed to be expelled by I2. So you can't have the trade union movement of Russia here, when Russia is killing them. For South Africa will scream, kick, and so on and so on. But that thing was happening. So Russia was supposed to be shunned upon that week everywhere it exists in the world. Yet, we are not saying the same thing against America. That is the president of the G20 today. We are begging, we are negotiating, we want to be part of the G20 in America. We as America. America that didn't come to the G20 in South Africa. They are saying we don't want you in America. We are begging to go there. But it is killing people, it's kidnapping a president of the country. Right. It is taking oil, million tons of oil. It says I'm going to sell this oil and I'm going to control it against the world. And where we want to go, G20 is supposed to be a platform in which the United Nations economically allows the free and the fair and the peaceful trading among the countries. G20 is supposed to do that. Oil is supposed to be a commodity that unites nations because we all need energy to survive. America has got no single barrel reserve of oil, but it's the biggest carbon emission in the world because it steals oil from everywhere. It goes and takes it. When it's in Russia, it goes and takes it. When it's in Iraq, it goes and takes it. Now it's Venezuela, they take it, they say, we cannot allow to have the biggest oil reserve in the world to be in the hands of America's adversaries. Yet, we want to back the whole America. America is going to host the World Cup this year. Russia was not hosting the World Cup. I mean, the Olympics. It just wanted its athletes to go and participate in the Olympics that were taking place, if not mistaken, in Japan. FIFA is going to say fuck off about America participating in the World Cup and hosting the World Cup. Why are we not asking South Africa and South Africa to boycott the World Cup? At least. I know we will not watch the World Cup, but I need to say I'm just saying, we will not watch the World Cup. But we need to set ourselves like that. When we have already masked our colors on the wall by taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, a very bold step which was dangerous in the eyes of America, which made us an American enemy number one. Wouldn't it be this thing a normal thing to do to campaign for South Africa, probably and more other world countries to boycott the World Cup if we can't get people to say we are changing the hosting of the World Cup from America to another country? We will be a lone voice, with a small voice, but I think we will well our soul and who we are, particularly what SLOVO was. What SLOVO was. At least on the international arena. Of course, I've done a lot in Palestine and everything else, but I'm just saying, comrades, it's a matter that we need to deal with properly. What was called in 1994, he joined an arrangement called the Government of National Unity. The first Government of National Unity was in 1994. That Government of National Unity was not because we suffered electoral loss as the ANC. was not because we needed a majority to govern the country. We were not forced by anything to be part of the government of national unity. It was part of our technique to transit and avoid bloodbath and make sure that we build the nation. We demonstrate our willingness to build the United Nations. And because we were clear on what we wanted to push, and because of the program of reconstruction and development program of SLOVO, the National Party walked out of the GMO in 1996. Because they couldn't stand for what they were pushing. They didn't get into that journey for what we were to do, what we were now saying we were doing. They walked out. They couldn't stand it. And we proceeded. The other question is, what is the relationship and what are the similarities or the difference between that GMO and the current GMO we're in? We knew what we wanted to achieve by that government of national unity in 1994. What exactly do we want to achieve by this government of national unity? Is it a tactic or is it a strategy? What is the strategy? So, because granted, it's a strategic setback because of the NTR, because we suffered the electoral loss as a movement. But when we forced to go to that couldn't have found any other thing, knowing exactly what the Democratic Alliance stands for, knowing that they walked out of the previous GNU because they couldn't stand up what they were doing. What made them think that this time they're going to survive this GNU, the ANC, that they ran away from in 1996? Is it because we have now found one another with them, we are now agreeing policy-wise? Or is it because they saw an opportunity to use their presence to reverse the advances of our movement, of our democratic dispensation, or our revolution elsewhere? But what is our thinking? How do you think we're going to survive, and also how do you think we're going to finally get out of it alive? You know, the things we're going to fight against or fighting with our movement, the sending off of the economy, particularly the industries like railways, or let me say transport, telecommunication, and so on, called the network industry. Because we're in the GNU, and the economy is said to be recovering at 0.1%, not even at 1%, 0.something, but we're celebrating. ESCOM is set to stabilize a year without a load shedding, so business is making. We are taken off of the grey list by Standard & Poor globally. We are no longer risky investing. We are taking off the junk status a little bit. The challenge we have is one, the Democratic Alliance is taking credit for that. So it's not our movement, number one. But number two is this stability, this getting out of the junk status, this economy grow by 1.0 or less than 1% instead of a 3% at least minimum, is the advantage for who? Who is now having more confidence in the current setup of the government between business, capital, foreign investors, and the majority of the working class and communities? Whether Bunali Junk status or Asio, the situation remains the same in my village. Whether South Africa is on the Junk status or it is out of the Junk status, has no shelter today. Whether it comes with Junk status or not. Junk status or not. But another thing is that South Africans have now been put in a situation where we get such suffer load shedding deliberately. We were made to stomach a lack of electricity, so that when the case is made for privatizing and abandoning ESCOM, those who are fighting against the abandonment must be pitted against the community who are now receiving an electricity without a load shedding. I want to know, I said that ESCOM relationship, I said no matter very soon, the municipalities will be unable, as they are able now, to provide electricity because it's unaffordable. Because regulatory, I want to look at it is because very soon they try to so that's when no let's come here, but almost that's where we are. So this thing is what capitalism does. It creates a crisis, and then it embarks on the process of resolving the crisis, and then we're going to thank it and whatever it's actually doing. That's what capitalism does across the world. That's what capitalism does. It distracts a nation, and then now they are rebuilding Libya, which they bombed. They are rebuilding Afghanistan, which they bombed. They are rebuilding Iraq, which they bombed. They are going to gather and rebuild Venezuela, which they bombed. So that they get the people of Venezuela, no, they're not only relying the schools to be rebuilt, it's food to be supplied, medication to be there. So we are being socialized to travel so that when the travel is resolved, we don't care who's bringing solution. That's the issue of success of countries. You may not have good schedule, but you will not afford to buy it. That's how it goes on. But the biggest issue here about the SLOVO guys is that, and the current government of national unity committee, is that this marked, and I must be careful with words here, this marked a total collapse, not in theory, but in practice, of anything about the alliance elections. Because it's so unbelievable. And that is because of the process, not just because of the fact that GNU needed to happen. GNU, fine, we needed to happen because we did not have a majority. We needed to form government. But who participated in the GNU? It broke any chance of ever calling this thing called the alliance a strategic alliance. For me, that's what I'm saying, I must be careful with the words. When I'm saying for me, I mean that I'm going to hold me accountable for these words and not hold the organization I represent accountable for. I do think that in as far as the African National Congress is concerned, the alliance is a tactical alliance and not a strategic alliance anymore. It's we use tactical in particular when the elections come. That's where the alliance becomes relevant. It's a tactic. Every election, the revolution is a tactic. It's not a strategy. Our strategy is not electoralism. Our strategy is a revolution. It's a revolution. It's not electoralism. Alliance does nothing good or valuable to the ANC unless during elections or unless for the elections. Nothing else. And at least, maybe the rest of us, we need the alliance more. We even need the ANC actually correctly so more, in particular because the ANC is in government. And we're using the state to transform the life of our people. That is why we seek to influence the thinking of the ANC, because it is in our interest that the ANC is occupying strategic levers of power in the state to transform the life of our people. So maybe we need more than it is the rest of us. In fact, successive presidents of the ANC, I'm not so sure about Mandela, but the rest of the other presidents of the ANC, starting with Tamil, they never really needed an alliance or a strong alliance. They needed an army within the alliance partners. Language. So they didn't know, or in the Communist Party,
who is my ally? Once the General Secretary is co-opted as an ally of the movement, it's done. We needed to know in that COSATU, who is my ally? That I can have a strategic discussion with, even if the rest of the leadership does not agree or the structures, but as long as I have an ally who's going to defend my interest, VANGA. The party is relatively small organization. They used to pride themselves as the most united organization in the Alliance Partners. I don't know whether that's true. But we do not see the effects of this phenomenon I'm talking about. But COSATU suffered that effect. Because of that issue, I'm just giving an example, those of you who are old, we had to deal with our president, when it was Tawambe. As COSATU. Couldn't find Madisha for misconduct as far as workers' issues is concerned. He was a very strong and powerful president of COSATU. He was a problem. He was fired. It was an honorable president of the ANC. And Accord, I'm not saying you were correct, because Nazi was a phenomenal president of the ANC. You understand what I'm saying? So COSATU split, if not almost split, because the item of the African National Congress was on the agenda of COSATU meetings. It is that item that split the COSATU. It's not whether we look at entries. It's not whether we look at more workers to be employed that split the COSATU. It is because on the agenda there was an item in the African National Congress leadership question in particular. Leadership question. This is Zuma, this is Mbeki, and then COSATU fired. General Secretary, then COCO was formed, and when COCO was formed, we lost the president, Madisha, we lost the former General Secretary of Philip Dexter, we lost the former General Secretary of COSATU, Bas Majlowa, and many provincial and many senior leaders of COSATU. We split them because of an item on the agenda called African National Congress. Not because workers have issues among themselves. What happened after that? We had another president of the ANC. We had another president of COSATU who also had an army there. And we were made, when this question came, to deal with Congress presidents too. Which I mean, some men are very cooler, city cooler. Let me go back, we forced them to see that in one central community area. When we chose that we were going with CRC, and he was an ally, but I just saw organizational of the president. So, the trend continues. And the reason is that the more COSATU fracture itself, it's a risk for the ANC. Because the more workers lose confidence in COSATU because of over-politicizing this kind of workers, not in class terms, by the way, in functional terms, the workers will disintegrate, but they will also raise the political affiliation rate. Because that's what has got an effect on their life. And then reverse this thing. Even Communist Party, maybe I'm young in the Communist Party, leadership structures, even the ANC, in particular the ANC. I don't remember a meeting of the ANC collapsing, people fighting, dividing themselves, including firing one another because they are fighting over issues of workers. The meeting of the ANC, that will be so robust. That people will fight, that people will differ, including risking a split of the ANC because Congress are fighting about the interest of workers and the interest of COSATU participants and allies. There's no such thing. They close it. When it comes to the ANC interest, they close it. Doesn't matter what we think. People know when they went to the Democratic Alliance, what do we all think? We told them, but they left us. They didn't call us to that meeting. for elections, not for any other thing. It's for elections. Any discussion now we're going to have is because there's election. It's not because we want to transform collectively the life of our people. And I don't think that is what the alliance of the Jongimpi SLOVO and our time at the time would have tolerated. So, comrades, however, so let me just finally, comrades, speak about we now commemorating Jongimpi SLOVO's 31st anniversary of his death and 100 years of his death. As I've said, the alliance relations could be better because, and I've already made this point, that I'm a proud bearer of a dual membership. It's not a burden to me. Now, Communist Party is important. When I speak in the ANC or speak about the ANC or speak in the meeting of the ANC, I wish the ANC well. Not only because I'm a member of the ANC, but because the ANC is an ally of workers, or it's an ally of SACP, or it's an ally of the SACP. But the ANC must also understand that when I speak with or for the SACP, with the SACP well, not because I also carry a membership of the SACP, it's because the SACP is an ally of the ANC liberation movement and SACP which I am the president of. So for me, there's no contradiction. Leyo this is what chooses. When, at the time when I joined, I was not asked whether I'm that or that. When I joined the Communist Party, they didn't ask me. In fact, they did. The union I belong to used in the meetings of how when you have an attendant register the meeting, you will write your name, you will write the position to the branch of the region, but you will be asked, are you a member of the SACP? You have to tick. Are you a member of the ANC? You have to tick. And you have to write the name of your branch. At the time we were running a campaign called Soil the Rank of the ANC, Soil the Rank of the SACP. I don't remember a campaign that says Soil the Ranks of Kosato Unions. I know that someone is struggling here with the march at the hands of ANC councillors. Because sometimes, because we belong to the same organization, when I'm a short squad of some in the municipality, and I'm also going to visit the branch of the ANC, where now either you're a councillor or a municipal manager, to go to that 170. But Sibalito is a branch, but the good land 170, who was so when the meeting in a resolution at last, the rival young person which is the matter, because we want to deal with but it's a political fanaticism. So, comrades, it's a reality. And although I'm not speaking for Kosato, it's a reality and a big quagmire for our citizens. Not because they question or should question their loyalty to the struggle for socialism or their class consciousness, but structurally, it's a big quagmire for the workers. That our two allies are going to go on the ballot in the 2026 local government election. So, although I'm still wearing a cap, not this one of the South African Communist Party Central Committee member, I would think we must bear with what Kosato is going to do. Because Kosato is many organizations in one. It's not one organization. I find that I'm manager to be in the party. The other Kosato, no matter the president, our is mixed. No matter the one or two affiliates, our is mixed. Because I'm a nigga affiliated as a ahambe abe ama-resolution awo before COSATU can speak as one organization. But why is it organized? Because the current generation of leadership of the alliance is failing to deal with this, not divisions, but this dynamic. Well, this is not division too. That the Communist Party is going to contest the election is not a division, or it's not dividing the alliance. Because who in the movement did not know that one day the Communist Party will contest the election? As SLOVO says in the document, that there will be a two-stage scenario where we will move with NDR and then we'll proceed to the class strike. Who did not know that at some point our alliance partner will contest the election? Why is it that it is now causing this and we are able to manage this thing as an alliance? So, comrades, all meetings that are taking place in the South African Communist Party are clear. We're no longer discussing whether we will contest or we will not contest. We have to do it to our areas in this meeting to clarify a few questions that people may have. That is what we call frequently asked questions. But we're not about justifying why we contest. Because it's also not true that this is out of anger. At least anger of personalities or anger of individuals when it comes to organization. But it could be an anger of the plight of the working class. And the Communist Party says, we can't sit by and not do anything. Remember the things I was talking about there, what we have done, when this is injustice and so on and so on, we took action. When these things happen, we call ourselves communists, we call ourselves Communist Party, we call ourselves this and we do nothing. So the Communist Party, first and foremost, is entering the path to address the crisis of the lack of working class representation in the state. The working class is no longer represented in the affairs of the state by those who occupy the state positions. And I'm not talking individually or personally, I'm talking policy-wise. The things we're pushing are not representing the working class. So we're addressing that. We would have thought that because the African National Congress is a multi-class organization, it's a multi-democratic organization, there's working class that is found in the ANC, and the majority membership of the ANC is a working class group. Then the working class is represented through the ANC. But the rightward shift, policy-wise for the ANC, make it difficult for the working class aspirations to find expressions in those corridors of power. Which is why the Party for Socialism need to step in. And the second point we want to clarify is that, comrades, I don't want you to say it was in 2002 when the debate about whether or not contest election started in the Congress system. It's so that's no Congress of the SACP. Since then, has never discussed the need for the Communist Party to contest election. None. So let's disabuse ourselves from the accusation that says this debate was the resolution of 2024 Special Congress of the party in December. No. It's a long decision. It was a question of delaying its implementation. And its implementation was affirmed in the 50th National Congress in 2022, not in 2024. But it was delayed again until the Special Congress then practicalized its implementation. So that's how we must do and we must act. We just clarify that. There is resolution. It's not a reaction to the GNU, or it's not a response to the formation of the GNU, or the implementation of this resolution it's a long-held position. And the next thing I want to say about it is that in 1993, there were two important discussions when Joe SLOVO was still alive at the time, the General Secretary, the chairperson of the Communist Party. It was now Chris and was now the General Secretary. The discussion about whether or not, now that we are going to 1994 to the elections, we have had this alliance with the ANC, which we call inter-class alliances for long. We are now taking our freedom, and we're a political party that is interested in power. Should we stand for election or not? That discussion was there. There's a resolution that was taken in that Congress, or in that discussion, that we will not, at this stage, given the uncertainty of the terrain, fragment the liberation forces. We will contest elections through the platform of the alliance supporting the ANC. We will not contest election on our own as the Communist Party at this time unless the National Democratic Revolution project is successfully hijacked. We just know who Chris and who the chairperson of the General Secretary. But I tell you, unless we come to the conclusion that the National Democratic Revolution project has been successfully hijacked. We do think, as the Communist Party of Solomon Pai, that the National Democratic Revolution project has successfully been hijacked. From 1996, when the SHINGANGE was abandoned and here came and its successive policies that kept on moving neoliberal way and the right-wing wise to a point where they move from the left and then they collide with the right. That's how we are one with the Democratic Alliance now. And organizing that stand against everything else that we stand for. There's no better expression of the successful hijacking of the project of the National Democratic Revolution than now. And therefore, consistent and pursuant to that discussion of 1993, the Communist Party feels compelled that Joe SLOVO would have felt compelled to take up arms in defense of the working class. And because the National Democratic Revolution, or the terrain of struggle now, has shifted to the state. The state is now a terrain that is being contested of power influence and class operation. We think we must get there, because no one represents us there to fight for the defense of our people. Because it doesn't matter, and the ANC knows this thing. When we were campaigning for the ANC last year, we kept on saying why the ANC must win this election, particularly in Western Cape, particularly in China, particularly in Johannesburg. Why we must win this election? It is because it doesn't matter the progressiveness of the manifestos we have. If you do not occupy the state apparatus, you are not going to do anything. It is through the departments, it is through the state power that we are going to change. We are going to build schools, we are going to centralize education in hospitals, we are going to employ people. So that's why even capital, which the business, they are now contesting state power. Because it's become a very important instrument the state speaks. So we're entering here complex to defend our people, to represent the working class. Because we think we can't fold our hands. And the time is now. And also, whether we dare or not, we collectively have been using the Jongimpi as a liberation movement. So when the power moves from the people's camp, it goes to the right way and all people, and then we remain vulnerable. We can't allow it. without killing one another. It's unthinkable that day. He is so angry at the SACP that is angry at the democratic election. When in the by-elections, the SACP gets 100 votes or 70 votes, he is celebrated a lot. When the DA is bullying them, they don't care that the DA is winning, they care that the SACP lost. They celebrate that the SSAP lost, but the DA is telling the world. I don't understand this thing. That you hate your own more than you hate your adversary. That you celebrate when the opposition, the real opposition, takes power and your own loses to make advances in defense of what we fought for all along together. I don't understand it. Today we are told you can't sit in the election strategy. What is it that we don't know as a Communist Party members as a strategy? What is it? Really secret that you have not contributed to it as a strategy yourself, you have not practicalized it all along. What is it that you don't know? So they think we would rather sit in a meeting, plot against the Communist Party. But it can convene a National General Council and invite the United States of America and France. There's no problem. In the NGC, we discuss the strategies, how we want to take our society forward, but we invite the United States of America and France to sit in the meeting. But you can't sit in the Communist Party. You can't. You can't see the Communist Party. But you can see who their imperialist adversaries. How about it? What is it? So, this dilemma is a problem because when you change Congress from the meeting of the ANC here in Free State, and there is Congress in that meeting, who is a member of the Queen's of the Party, that's to be an example. But he's there with this capacity as concerned. What must he do? Must he stay in that meeting?
No.
Because even go to a meeting and then you want to change the general secretary of the party or the DGS, and I'm there as the president of the House, as the president of COSAP, but I'm the second committee member of COSAP. If never we start at the meeting, who crochet leadership game my analysis. It's the same way, when we want to change the ANC in the meeting which I'm attending with my president, and I say, no, I'm going to leave the ANC because I'm the ANC. You're not going to change the ANC in the meeting. I'm not going to allow that. So we must think carefully what we're doing. Is it a permanent thing? Is it the killing of the alliance? Does it cut across? What must workers do when the leadership of the working class organization is being moved out? What must workers do in it? What do you expect them to behave? So that's why I'm calling for, in the name of justice, sober minds, not populism, not arrogance. It is difficult, granted, it's not easy, I agree. But it was SLOVO and his peers faced the difficult times with their own at the time. We are facing our difficult time. Let us confront them, let us run away. Let's not go down by accepting that this problem is going to run away. They are not. And communists, you must make a mark. You may not win a municipality here in Australia. But at some point, when a player called a command into Algeria, some guy that I really know, they just handed that thing to him, and I was 60 no alliance discussion. We didn't know what is the strategy. We didn't know who's command, what you represent, what is going to do to your southern. Our alliance just gave that a you have a corporate code once of the he's a minister, there's one seat. He's alone, he's a minister of he's a seat. He's a president, he's a minister, sits in the cabinet. fear that you are not going to win elections? What is this fear that you are not going to win? What is this fear that you are not going to win? What is this fear that you are not ready? Who's going to blow the whistle and say they're ready? Because our comrades argue that they know, they appreciate, that they are not against that two-state solution. They are not against. They know that there's a time when the municipality must take over the government. They understand. They are just saying, we believe that that time of the strategic stage is not yet arrived. How are we going to know? What are the signs? What are the signs that will show that the time is arrived? When, in other words, the NDR, it's a halfway house. There must be pure socialists and pure nationalists, which is what's not going to happen. When we have people today asking you to choose whether you're a communist or not, when the people in 1993 who allow their membership to relax so that they can be pure nationalists, how are we going to know that the stage has arrived? So, when you enter in the community, you build in working class consciousness because you're representing working class. 1, 2, you must be known what you're standing for. For such a long time, you have been under the shoulder of somebody, right? You understand that you no longer know whether you're a communist party, what is it that you stand for. Even when you stand and criticize the things that are anti-revolutionary, we think that we are perfect. Because you've never had the courage of conviction. You say, I believe in this thing, and I'm going to defend this thing that I believe in. You've never done so. You have always threatened to get into the boxing ring, warm up into the touchline, crowd cheering, thinking that I will get in until the match is over. Now is the time to enter the playing field and play with the big boys. You must play with the big boys. There are very few communist parties in the world that are not contesting elections. Very few. In fact, I don't remember which one. But I know there are those who are contesting. Almost every communist party in the world, they are contesting elections. In Greece, I don't want to talk about China, because there are contestations there. But in India, in Russia, in Vietnam, everywhere, the communist party is the communist party of power. It was just unique in South Africa because of the resolution against of 1993. By the way, 1993, Lumsa was having the same discussion. Whether should we go and support the ANC, or should we now form a workers' party and engage with the ANC as a they were defeated. They brought up together with each and every Congress outside. They were consistent. What are we doing in the alliance of the bourgeois organization that is in power? We kept on defeating them until they left. It was not a new view they were holding when they were discussing the rule. They always had that view since 1983 Special Congress. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the majority must then win and then move the majority. So, Congress, as I said, that the Congress, okay, I thought they made my life easy, but I realized they made my life difficult. Because if they didn't do what they did, I would have started with my notes and read out of the dog. But because they said I must talk to the politics, I must leave, because the memorial lecture, so I had to do this thing. So I'm sure it has got pros and cons, the approach they've taken. But comrades, long live the memory of Comrade Christopher, long live. Long live. Long live the fighting spirit of Christopher, long live. Long live. Viva working class internationalism, viva! Viva! Viva working class solidarity, viva! Viva!
Hallelujah.